Welcome. Oh, I always miss you guys. Thank you, Ronan. Welcome back. We have a bunch of questions and then I'll open it up for everyone. Hi, Pooja. So, Pedro. Pedro says, when I suddenly find myself having awareness, where should I place it? Sometimes I pop into awareness during the day, but get kind of confused. What should I do with it? I try to om on the chakras or slow the out breath, but other times I just want to rest effortlessly the attention. And when I place the attention somewhere, should I keep bringing it back? Beautiful question. And I think this question is coming from, there we go. Did it work? I think this question is coming mostly from the practices that Yogananda suggested. He said you ought to keep your attention on the spiritual eye all day. And I did that. I did that quite a bit. And it did pull the energy up towards the brain. It did help with that. And then I had splitting headaches for years. And so I don't overemphasize the spiritual eye, do I? In fact, I warn against it. And Ashok told me, well, your spiritual eye is really for powers. Like if that's your whole concentration, then you're going after powers. The medulla is for your much more spiritual benefit. In fact, we have another question at the very end here. Amy says, hi, I'm curious as to why you say Om Japa in the medulla instead of the third eye. Well, this is a beautiful question. And the reason is that the medulla is the breath center and the heart rate center. It helps to moderate both of those in the body. So if I just place my mind on the medulla, and you guys probably saw that tiny little exercise where you move your head, I'm just moving it about that much, right? Just like an inch or 2 inches. I'm just doing that and trying to feel the cervical vertebrae going into the skull. And that helps me to find by feeling the medulla. And when you find it, when you really put your mind there, you'll feel this kind of and that feeling is coming from your heart rate going down. And as you might put on a heart monitor and you might check and you might see, can I notice that my heart rate is going down? It might be so fractional you don't even see it on the heart monitor, or you might see it. But that's the reason you feel peace. Because the medulla is regulating your breath rate and your heart rate. It's involved in both of those. So it's an extremely important center. It's an extremely important center for the Kriya Yogi. So we want to make sure we don't miss that point. And that's why the Kriya Yoga that was given to me by Ashok does not overemphasize the spiritual eye. When we do Yoni Mudra, we will use the spiritual eye. And I often see the spiritual eye right in the middle of the meditation spontaneously. But I don't overuse it. I'm much more interested in the medulla, and I'm much more interested in the crown. So if you wanted to make a practice where you were keeping your mind on one of those, then I would use the medulla or the crown or possibly the heart. But there are 3 main components that I talk about a lot, right? And if you really boil everything down that we're doing to the bare essential, what it's really about is the dorsal vagal, which includes bliss. It includes Om Japa. It includes feeling the chakras. It includes the low idle state and HRV resonance. And the next thing that we're doing is the left amygdala of bliss. So that's cute baby. That's bhakti. Bhakti. That's your ishta practice. That's prayer. That's communion. And then we have the right hippocampus, which is expansion. Expansion, the non-dual state, the sense of knowing. And so if you reduce it down to those, and that's all it really is, those three things, we can fit everything within those three categories. Well, Forrest, what about samadhi? Well, samadhi's in there too. That's the non-dual state that takes place through the right hippocampus. So everything is contained in those three things. That's kind of wild. So I'm in the middle of my day and I want a practice. I want to engage those most important things. How can I engage that? Well, I might feel bliss along the spine. I might see if I can find bliss along the spine. I might do cute baby. I might practice bhakti. I might say a prayer. That's my left amygdala. I might practice hakala. I might practice contemplating the hugeness of the divine. I was talking to a yogi the other day. I said, you know what the jnana yogis are doing? What are they really doing? They're trying to contemplate the hugeness of the divine. That is expansion. That's the right hippocampus. That's what the jnana yogis are really trying to do. They're trying to step into an absorption or prepare themselves for an absorption. And then there's lots of other things. So you can practice the presence. When you're practicing the presence, you can do it in a dualistic way. You can say, Divine Mother is with me. I can feel her over my shoulder. Or you might say, I feel the motherly presence everywhere. Or I feel the fatherly presence everywhere. I feel the Revered Father, Babaji. I feel him everywhere, in everything. Well, that's more expansive, isn't it? And so it all comes down to those three things. Kriya is all about those three things. And so that's kind of a nice place to rest. And so when you're in your day, you might contemplate those three things. Or how can I engage those? And then it becomes, and I know this kind of frustrates. Why don't you just give me one answer and I'll just do that one thing? Well, because if you only do one thing, it will become stale. Your left brain will over-rationalize the process, and it will become a left brain concept rather than being fun and spontaneous. But if you treat your practices like a buffet, then you'll walk up to the buffet and you'll go, oh, what do I feel like today? And you'll just pick, and now it's fun, it's interesting, your heart is in the game, and it's spontaneous, and it will pull you out of the left brain and closer to the right brain. So that's a really good reason to have multiple practices in your day. And of course, Om Japa in the chakras, I can do the Kriya therapy all day. You said, I just want to rest. I just want to rest effortlessly the attention. Then just be. You can just be, and you can just practice being here. Just be present. Just be curious. Just be interested. And that is expansive a little bit. So, beautiful question. You can be the watcher. So you'll hear people say, well, just be the watcher. Just watch yourself. What is that? That's expansion. You're engaging the right hippocampus when you become the watcher. So every time you hear somebody say, be the watcher, that's the right brain. That's all they're trying to talk about. Amazing, right? Great question, Pedro. I have a question about the breath hold sensations. 2 days ago, I woke up feeling weak, and I could not shake the sensation off. I decided to go on with the Kriya regimen, thinking it would help me feel better. Mahamudra was okay. Navi was okay. HRV was okay. Then the breath hold. Uh-oh, I instantly felt a cold upward wave, massive tingles, like on the verge of fainting, like I used to feel when I did Wim Hof breathing, which I did not like. It was too forceful. So I stopped the exercise. But usually the breath hold makes me feel like I'm falling into a deep, comfortable well of silence. Was it because I was feeling weak? Absolutely. Was the HRV sequence not as good as I thought? No, it was perfect. It was great. I'm usually on the low blood pressure side. So now there's a consistent, there's a predominance in the body. And you were feeling weak. And so you have to be aware of where your body is at. So I'm usually on the low blood pressure side. And I suspect the blood pressure might have been particularly low that specific morning because you were feeling weak. Eating didn't help, so I ruled out hypoglycemia, so it was not low sugar. The weak feeling stopped when I was able to lie down and do nothing for a long moment, and your body was able to reset. So yes, so you already have low blood pressure. So when you are feeling weak, definitely do not do the breath holds. Or if you're not sure, do a tiny little breath hold and see how you feel. But if it does not feel like, if you don't feel up to it, don't force yourself. Those are all signals from your subconscious telling you the state of your body. And you want to be present with that and listen to that. So HRV resonance, you're not going to get yourself into trouble. And the Mahamudra, you know, if you are gentle with yourself, you're not going to get yourself into trouble. The Navi, you're not going to get yourself into trouble. The breath holds are a little bit advanced. And so you want to be extremely gentle with yourself when you're practicing the breath holds. Now, if you're young and you're fit and you think you can do anything, then, you know, you can be a little more, you can push the envelope a little harder. But when you're feeling weak or when you're sick or when your body tells you, I'm not ready for this, please listen to that. That is your subconscious, and even the superconscious will give you messages through your subconscious. Hey, don't go in there. Don't do that. Give it a break. Give it a rest. Don't be in a hurry. And so just listen to those messages, and you were able, I'm so glad that you were able to lie down and totally relax and reset. And so that's perfect. And so, yeah, your blood pressure is a little on the low side. And so when you have those not right feelings, you definitely want to listen to those and allow for that. And a lot of times I don't need to do the breath holds. And I know this from other yogis as well. So we're trying to create this perfect balance, right? Which is this much HRV resonance and this much blood pressure variability resonance. But what if you already have some of that low blood pressure, right? Like some people are automatically, not just when you're not feeling right, but at other times people just have a slightly lower blood pressure, and they do a little bit of the HRV resonance, and then boom, they go into this very deep state. And so they didn't have to do a bunch of breath holds in order to create that balance. So if you're already low and you do some HRV resonance and you feel amazing, you might not need the breath holds. It happens quite often. And besides, so don't think, oh my God, I can't do the breath holds today or for a week or whatever, and oh no, I'm missing out. Don't think that, because what we're actually trying to get into is the tranquil breath. And so the tranquil breath is beyond HRV resonance. It is beyond the breath holds. The breath holds are just the HRV resonance and the breath holds are only a path into the tranquil breath. What we actually want to happen is the tranquil breath, a deep freeze response that is the interiorization that Patanjali is talking about, and also the roll-up of consciousness. So, very great question. And I'm so glad that you're okay and it turned out all right. All right. Bernard, you have a quote here, which I keep hearing about this. Oh, good. You're so welcome. Bernard, I keep hearing about this from different yogis. So yes, that is the alternate nostril breathing. In fact, this is another yogi complaining about other yogis, and they do this all the time. Extolling the virtues of pranayama, the yoga shastras have given a clarion call to mankind. Meaning the one who practices pranayama lives blissfully in the earthly world. That's what we're attempting to do. This is the bliss program. But this pranayama is not practiced by pressing the nose. It is derived exclusively from the guru, because by this air, by this, the air is arrested perforce, and kumbhak occurs, kumbhak is holding the breath, against the natural tendency and incurs a risk of disease. This denotes that the pranayama practiced by less intelligent persons of blocking the nostrils with the fingers is abandoned by the yogis. So can you clarify if this includes alternate nostril breathing? Yes, that is exactly what he's talking about. He is complaining about alternate nostril breathing. And if you look at Lahiri Baba, he doesn't complain about it, but he does not practice it, did not give it out to his students. It's not part of the Kriya Yoga regimen. And I heard from another yogi, this was Sri Narod. Sri Narod wrote about alternate nostril breathing, and he said there are a number of yogis that, and they're not just doing it once or twice or 10 or 20 or 50 times. They're doing it for hours every day. And they found that a lot of these yogis, what he said was they were modifying the breath rhythm in the body so much, and not a natural way, right? We're awakening the parasympathetic by controlling our breath. So we have this much control, and we're trying to get into a very deep ease, which is the tranquil breath. So we control it this much and we let go. Yeah, they turn it into a left brain exercise, absolutely. And they really force, so we're using this much control and then we let go. And they're using this much control for hours at a time. And they change the rhythm of their breath and their heart. And they found that a lot of these yogis were dying young because of it. And so Sri Narod's like, I don't know about that alternate nostril breathing. I can't recommend it. In fact, stay away. And so if you try it a little, you're not going to hurt yourself, okay? But if you do the exact breath regimen and you do, they've got a very specific count, those guys, when they do it for hours and hours, they actually shorten their life. So not a good idea. And that's, I did quite a bit. Can't say I got a lot out of it. What they're doing is they're actually trying to induce, the count is 1, 4, 2. Yeah, exactly. So it's this strange count, and it's altering the rhythm of your breath and your heart, and it's too much. It's trying to exert too much control over the body and force the body in an extremely tight direction, right? So you notice that everything that I do, it's very easy. It's very hands off. It's very, we're going to do this in concentrated way, and then get back and relax and see what happens. And we just kind of do that. So there's a kind of flow that is taking place in the Kriya Yoga versus this control, which the alternate nostril breathing, when they really get into it, that's what happens. It's this tight-fisted control. What do they say about Scrooge? A tight iron fist against the grindstone. What was that? Something like that? Hilarious. So yeah, the alternate nostril breathing, a lot of yogis will speak out against it. What are they actually trying to induce? HRV resonance. Are they accomplishing it? Yes, if you do a little bit, it will induce HRV resonance, but then you've got to let go. And they don't. They keep controlling, and that's where they get into trouble. So a little is good, a lot, not so much. And all they're trying to do is HRV resonance. You already know exactly how to do that. And this is why, this is one of the reasons why it's not in the Kriya Yogas. Lahiri Baba knew you didn't need the alternate nostril breathing. You can just do the long breathing, and bingo, HRV resonance is there. Amber. This is an experience I had since age 11. The first one I noticed came between the eyebrows, a very interesting tingling sensation, which I had a slight bliss to it. That's the first knot, by the way. But it was entirely on the surface of the skin and bright in tone. Again, that's the first knot. That's the first knot experience. So the energy has risen up to the spiritual line. You're feeling some of that. Or you could call it a Kundalini experience as well. At the time, I thought it was the third eye, but didn't want to be arrogant. Well, that's it. That is the third eye. Then a little time passed, and I felt it on the bottom of the throat, in that pocket before the chest. Okay, right here. And that one is way more powerful and can be uncomfortable with intensity. Yeah, so that's more like a Kundalini experience. When it gets uncomfortable, you're feeling that the energy is doing something there, and it's so much information. Occasionally it will be uncomfortable. When things like this happen and you feel uncomfortable, please talk to your subconscious like your best friend. This is why we want to integrate with the subconscious, be nice to the subconscious, make friends, make handshakes, make deals with the subconscious. The subconscious will say, I don't want to meditate. Okay, subconscious, we're just going to start with 5 minutes. We can do 5 minutes, right? And subconscious is like, oh, okay, yeah, 5 minutes, 5 minutes. And we get in there and we're like, oh, isn't this great? And the subconscious goes, oh yeah, it's kind of good. Okay. Can we stay longer? Oh yeah, fine, let's stay longer. Yeah. And you slowly get the subconscious on board. Subconscious goes, no, I don't want to do that. Okay, subconscious, what if I make a deal with you? You allow me to do this thing that I want to do in yoga or whatever it is, and I will give you a cookie when we're done. Subconscious goes, okay, I'm good with that. And you make friends with your subconscious. It's so worthwhile, because when these kind of things happen, thanks, Ben, when these kind of things happen, you want to talk to your subconscious and you want to go, hey, this big thing I'm feeling in my throat, could you tone it down? Like, I'm feeling too much of it. And that's really what it is. You're getting all this information, which is usually below the surface of your consciousness. It's usually in... I didn't know we have a Tasha. Tasha, welcome. It's usually below the surface. It's usually below the surface of your consciousness. And now you are integrating with that. And so more information is being presented to you. And so you feel this thing. We're talking about your specific thing that you're feeling. You feel it in your throat. It doesn't happen as much anymore. Yeah, so the Om Japa and the integration and the insurance is helping. Perfect. So, but for people that have this kind of thing, it's more information, and you talk to the subconscious and you say, could you tone that down? And over time, this will happen by itself. So you'll hear a lot of people that have Kundalini experience. They're like, over time, it will be okay. Yeah, that's why. Because your subconscious goes, oh, wait, that's uncomfortable for you. Let me tone it down for you. But you can make that happen very fast. You don't have to wait for years if you just talk to the subconscious. Okay, I'm going to keep going. Painful, uncomfortable. Then I thought to look for them and found one near the bottom of the rib cage, also in that pocket. They discover when touched by the hand, I would meditate on these sensations while laying in bed, but haven't found them very pertinent in a while. They seem slightly different than the chakra sensations, which are more internal. Yeah, we're talking more closer to the spine, and you're feeling these more possibly on the surface. All of that is normal, natural. And a lot of times the yogi will feel these smaller energy centers. And so you can go online and go look up, like what would you look up? You would look up minor chakras. Look up something like minor chakras and you'll see all these fancy diagrams of all these minor energy centers. They're kind of common sense, like, the elbow, the wrist, the middle of the hand, the tips of the fingers. I mean, you don't have to be a genius to figure it out. They're all the little places where your body and your system need a focus, a locus of energy, right? And so you're feeling all of those. They seem slightly different. I can make them appear anytime I want. Perfect, because you're aware of them, and could do so as a kid as also. I never found any such surface level sensations for the lower chakras, and when I look, it is internal. Probably all through the ventral vagal, which is mostly right here. I figure they must be some way related to chakras. Yeah, they are the minor chakras, but they seem unique also, so I wanted to ask if you know about this. Absolutely. So perfect, great question, and I think we answered it. Very good. All right. Lee May, hi Forrest, and one of your timeline therapy trainings, you shared how we can bring a past life skill into our current life. I'm curious, can you share such skill that you have brought back and how it made a difference for you? Wow, that's hard. So the technique, by the way, very, very easily is that you, first of all, find out where your timeline is. And that's as simple as go ahead and point to your past. Don't think, just point to your past, and then point to your future. So let's say that's your timeline, or this is your timeline, or maybe this is your timeline. Doesn't matter. So you find that timeline, and then you float up above those. And that's how your subconscious stores time. So it's a real thing inside of your subconscious. It's just sitting there. And so now we're going to use it. And to get the lost resources, we just float up above the timeline. It's a good idea, by the way, to go through all of the training videos that I have on Patreon for timeline therapy. Release anger, sadness, fear, hurt, and guilt. Release those main 5 negative emotions. You will feel lighter. Your whole life will get more joyful and blissful and easy and peaceful. That's a beautiful thing. Your meditations will get better because of it. And now we're kind of, that's kind of a good idea before we take a ride all over the timeline, right? We want to wash those out a little bit. You can also stand up over your timeline and just ohm into things. That's totally okay. And so what we're going to do is we're going to float up above the timeline, float way back over our past, and kind of look out over our past lives and ask the subconscious. So this is a handshake. This is trust with the subconscious. Hey, subconscious, higher self, please draw me back to a time when I had a skill that I don't have now. A time where I had more of something than I have now. And allow the subconscious and the higher self to just take you back into your past lives and just float right down. And when I've done this, it's very, very subconscious for me. So I will float down. I might not have an exact memory, but I will get a lot of feelings. If you heard my story when I was very young, that was my brain language, was energy and feelings. And so when I do a lot of these processes, that's what I go into. I feel that energetic and colorful kind of very, very lots of feeling information in the form of feeling and knowing, not necessarily in language or precise things, right? And so I'll go back there and I'll gather a resource. I won't know what it is a lot of times, which sounds scary, but you can sense that it's very good, whatever it is. And I will draw that into myself and I'll bring it back to the present. And sometimes I've had, in a meditation or in a dream, I've had angels come and put huge plates, like tablets, but I don't know, like metal plates that had code written on the tablets, and they just slid those into my brain, right? Which is all a pictorial representation of some kind of knowing, some kind of bliss, some kind of expansion pack going into your brain. You know, if you've ever had a computer and you put an extra USB in there, or you put an extra card or something, and they call it an expansion, the divine USB. Yes, exactly. Thank you. So you bought yourself an expansion pack. So occasionally I've had some expansion pack downloads, and you don't have to. You got an M2 chip for us. That's awesome. Yeah. So when these things happen, sometimes you will want to know, like, what is this? And sometimes there's not a clear answer. And so it still works when there's not a clear answer. But you just have to kind of be present and walk into your life and go, what's different? And the same thing in meditation. You will have a download. Sometimes I have a download. I know exactly what it is. I know exactly what the learning is. Sometimes I'll get a message and I won't know what it means for years. So I think most people have heard the story. I was in a samadhi, and as I fell out of the samadhi, I was kind of sorry to be leaving the samadhi. I'm like, I'm so sad to leave the samadhi. And in that split second, Divine Mother took pity on me. And so I'm out of the samadhi and I have a dualistic experience. Divine Mother tells me, next time it will be deeper and you will meet St. John. Well, I didn't know what that meant for over 10 years. Can you imagine? 10 years. And then I met Ashok, and everything that he told me guided me in the correct direction. Everything. So that's the basis of what I teach, are the small points that he gave me. He said medulla, that's a core thing. Long breathing, that's a core thing. Make the out breath slightly longer, that's a core thing that I teach. All these tiny little core pieces came from him, and it's the basis of everything that I do. And so he was my St. John in my life. He was that representative. That's how the higher self chose to express it towards me. And so a lot of times you won't know what something means for a very long time. Sometimes you'll know right away. Sometimes you'll know in days. Sometimes you'll know in a week. I didn't know for 10 years. And that's kind of beautiful. It becomes beautiful. At first it's like, well, that's kind of annoying. I want to know. But then you roll with it enough, you're kind of like, this is kind of beautiful. This is a love story, and it's kind of unfolding. And I don't know what it's going to be, but you reach that place where you become like Hans Christian Andersen, and you say, my life is a beautiful fairy story told by God. So Lime, those things that I went back for, I could feel them but I didn't know what they were exactly. And many times I had downloads from angels and I could feel them. I didn't know what it was exactly, except maybe to say an expansion pack. What is this? This is your expansion pack for bliss. Okay, I'm totally on board. Download away. So yeah, that's kind of amazing, and that will happen. Thank you, Lee May. Beautiful question. Nancy says, can you explain how the timeline therapy might aid the yogi in remembering past lives? What is the best hour in which to try to tap into the life regression? Would it be midnight to 3 a.m.? That's a special time. But the beautiful thing about the timeline therapy is that you can do it at any time. And again, it's this handshake. So the more handshakes that you make with the subconscious, the more okayness that you create between you and your own subconscious, the more that you do maybe the inner child work and you go down and talk to the inner child. If I want to read on what is actually happening, I will do that exercise with the person that I'm talking to. I will walk them through the inner child exercise, and I will find out what the inner child is saying. Because sometimes the conscious mind will say this, but the subconscious will say something totally different. And I really want to know what the subconscious is saying. The conscious mind is also valuable. But when I can put the two together, it's like, oh, now we can understand. And so instead of doing 3 hours of therapy, I can do 10 minutes of therapy and find out what's actually going on. So that's kind of incredible. So again, with the timeline therapy, it's a process which engenders, is that how you say it? Anyway, it's a process that helps the cooperation between the conscious mind and the subconscious mind. So those two things coming together are what the timeline therapy is doing. And that little exercise, you can do it at any time. Now, if you're a little bit sleepy, then you have more melatonin in your blood, and you might have a little more vision of what's going on. And so that might ease the way. But I would just try it over and over again and get more information. So continuing, can you explain how that might aid? So how is that going to help you? Clearing out is the most important thing that you can do. Clearing out the past. Clearing out the past lives. Clearing out the generational trauma. Clearing all of that out. That's going to aid you tremendously. And I remember John, I gave him the timeline therapy and he picked it up and he just, sometimes you pass the ball to somebody and they sit there with the ball. They're like, Forrest, I don't quite know what to do with the ball. And sometimes you pass the ball and it's like, oh, I got the ball. And they just run. And that was John. He got the timeline therapy and he just ran. He just took that ball and he ran. And he called me up one day and he goes, I have no judgment. It's kind of freaking me out. I don't have any more judgment about anything. It's kind of freaking me out. And I'm like, that's awesome. And it was all because of the timeline therapy. So he cleared and he cleared and he cleared and he cleared and he just found himself in this state which was more clear than he had ever been. And that's what I did as well with the timeline therapy. And then the Om Japa is also tremendous. So I just think they come together beautifully. Nancy continues with her question. According to Gautama, the historical Buddha, he claimed to recollect in great detail his past lives, whereby he supposedly related this information to many of his disciples, who later wrote down the words and teachings of the Buddha long after his Mahasamadhi. The middle-length discourses of Buddha has a chapter about his enlightenment and recollection of his past lives. When I was a young child, I would have experiences of remembering being connected to different places, like a deja vu. One such experience occurred about 8 years ago when I came across the text called the Tibetan Book of the Dead. The text seemed very familiar, although I had never read it in this lifetime. but the words of enter into the bardo and seen the red light, the blue light. Anyway, it all sounded so very familiar, yet I didn't know why. Could this be a bit of info from a past life that has been uprooted? Absolutely. Absolutely. So you'll notice that. You'll notice when I was a kid, I was very drawn to bows and arrows. I thought maybe I'd been a Native American in a past life or something because I was so drawn to bows and arrows. Maybe I had somebody tell me I was with Arjuna once. Another one told me I was with Rama. I don't know. If I was with Rama, I have been on a long ride, man. I've been on a long ride. I'm ready to get out. And I'm not surprised. I'm a little slow. So, I've had people come and tell me things many times, and makes total sense to me. Especially when I was totally into bows and arrows, and of course that's what all of the Bhagavad Gita is all about: bows and arrows, right? So, is that a deja vu that you're feeling? Is that a past life? I would say so. And that's been my personal experience, that you will have, trying to think of a word, you'll have this kind of affinity. That's the word. You'll have an affinity for something that you cannot explain. And psychology would say, well, it's something in your childhood. Yep, maybe. And maybe that childhood coincides with the past life. So I don't know. There's some affinities. It's just really hard to explain. Oh, here's one. I had a realization that I was a past Buddhist. I totally believe that. Here I had an affinity. I had a strange affinity. So I was very interested. My mom told me these stories, these visions she had of me when she was carrying me, of Buddhist monks. I've mentioned it somewhere. And it just fascinated me, and it really pointed me towards meditation. And she would read some books about Buddhist monks in monasteries meditating, and it just, talk about a thrill. I couldn't stop. I could listen to that all day. And then I started I grew up a little bit, and I started looking for meditation, and everything that I could find, which was in the middle of nowhere. It was up in North Idaho, in the middle of nowhere, Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. And so it's a tiny little town, and I think we had one spiritual bookstore, and then we had two. And I was so excited when we had two spiritual bookstores. Now everybody just goes on Amazon, right? But at that time, if there was no bookstore, there were no books, and you were out of luck. And so I was going into these little bookstores looking for texts on how to meditate, and everything was extremely simplistic. It was, contemplate a flower opening. I'm like, what? I had this deep sense in me that there was a very scientific, concrete technique out there, and I could not find it. And then I found Autobiography of a Yogi, and he described Kriya, and I'm like, oh my God, that's it. That's what why, and I couldn't understand why everybody else didn't have a concrete technique of pranayama. And so to me, that's a past life tendency. It's the only way I can explain the extreme conviction that I had. It was not a small conviction. It was huge. I knew that all these books were wrong. And that's I was just a kid. How could you know that something's wrong or too overly simplistic when you're that young? I just knew it was. And so, yeah, that's a past life. But it's so what if you don't have a past life recollection? Does that mean you're not as deep as other yogis? No, not at all. You're going to have intuition about the things which you are deeply interested in. And that's kind of interesting to know. So I have had a tremendous focus on Kriya Yoga. And so I'm extremely intuitive when it comes to meditation techniques and Kriya Yoga, because that is my whole focus. And what you are interested in, you will find that it will open up. And I think I've shared in my book that beautiful quote that if you love something enough, it will give up all of its secrets to you. And that's intuition. That is exactly how intuition works. If you love something enough, it will give up all of its secrets to you. And that's why the yogis say that you can have outward learning. Yeah, that's normal and fine. But the intuitive learning will always be superior. And you will grasp things directly. And you will just kind of know. And that's we don't step into that and go, well, I just know. No, it's not from the ego. It's not from the left brain. It's a curious question, and it's out of love. And then it just blossoms, and you go, oh my God, I think I know. And that's really beautiful, isn't it? So fantastic question, Nancy. Thank you. Olga, dear Guruji, yesterday I felt, this is so cool. Yesterday I felt something different in my chakras, like they were little clean mirrors. That's just a rough comparison. Putting my attention into them felt blissful. Isn't that beautiful? And this is what I'm talking about, that this feeling of cleanliness will arise very often in the Kriya Yogi. So if it happens one time and it doesn't happen another, don't worry about it. That's totally normal. But this feeling will arise of, oh my God, I feel clean. Or, oh my God, I feel lighter. I do a lot of timeline therapy, and when we finish, people go, oh my God, I feel lighter. And that's exactly what the Kriya Yogis, Kriya is doing as well. The Om Japa in the chakras specifically. And the low idle state. You feel lighter. There's less work being done. Less carrying around of baggage. So Olga says, however, I can't explain how the bliss really felt. Does that make sense? How should one feel bliss in the chakras? I love this. Beautiful question. And it's kind of a strange thing. First of all, we don't have a box for bliss. You know, you got a box for joy. You got a box for in your mind of happiness. You got a box for gratitude. We know what those things are, right? We think we know. And then bliss. What is bliss? I don't have a box for bliss. So we're here creating a box for bliss. And then you feel something and you're like, is that bliss? Because I feel like I'm blissful, but I'm not sure if this is the correct bliss. And I remember, which is so funny, because I wrote to Ashok. I've told you this before. I wrote to Ashok, and I'm like, I have bliss in the heart, and I have bliss along the spine, and I even feel bliss around the diaphragm, right? And I'm feeling bliss on the top of the head, and then there's this kind of peaceful bliss, and I'm naming all of these different feelings that I'm getting, and I was hoping that he would come back and kind of explain these things to me. And he just wrote back, he's like, so you're getting a lot of bliss, huh? That's great. And that was it. That's all he said. Just, you're getting a lot of bliss, and that's great. So he loved to hear that you were having success with Kriya Yoga and that you were getting to bliss. But understanding what that bliss is, it's kind of tricky. And you'll be like, okay, that was blissful, but I don't even know how to describe what that was. And it's so perfect. I really love it. Sometimes you'll have peace and bliss. Sometimes you'll have joy and bliss. Sometimes it will just be peaceful, and you'll just rest in the peace. And then you'll notice, oh my God, this peace is actually blissful. That, by the way, that's perfect. I remember I was a monk, and I was trying to find joy. And I was trying to find joy in my daily life. And I realized at a certain point, you're so busy looking for joy, you're overlooking that you're not at peace. Why don't you just be peaceful, first of all? And so I'm like, that was a big download for me. And so I really concentrated on I'm not going to worry about joy. I'm not worried about happiness. I'm not worried about this or that. I'm just going to find peace. And I started to establish peace in myself. And then out of that peace came joy. And so a lot of times you'll be in a very peaceful state. You're like, well, I feel lots of peace along the spine. Great. I don't feel bliss. And I'm like, that's great. Hang out with the peace. You're like, okay. So you hang out with the peace. And then all of a sudden the peace becomes blissful. Perfect. Absolutely perfect. And so you're feeling different things and it's starting to get blissful. And that's gorgeous. At a certain point, you'll be able to just turn it on. And somebody said, how much bliss should I have? Because I don't want to get too drunk. And that's a good thing. Like, you don't want to get too drunk with bliss because, well, I don't. Because I like to drive my car and, I have to take care of my daughter, these important things in my life. And so I want to have a certain amount of bliss. And that's kind of a crazy thing to say, that you can regulate your own bliss. But this is exactly what happens. Want to be mad drunk bliss, like the crazy Sufis? Yeah, you can be. I mean, I've had that state. So, Julia, I think Julia is here, and Julia and I were praying together, and I showed her the prayer, and at the end of the prayer, I was so blissed out. We got off the call, and I was so blissed out. I'm like, I think I'm done. Like, if I answer another call, I'm going to sound like a madman. And so, Amy, welcome. Welcome, Amy. I actually already answered your question, but I'll be happy to answer it twice because it's so great. Thanks, Julia. Yeah, I got so blissful that I was done for the rest of the day. And so that will happen to you as a Kriya Yogi. And that's totally okay. So, Amy, I don't know if you're returning but your question was, why the medulla over the spiritual eye? And this comes from Ashok. Ashok told me that the spiritual eye is mostly for powers, and the medulla is very important for the yogi because it regulates the heart rate and it regulates the breath rate. And so by placing your attention and oming into it, you help the heart rate and the breath rate to lower. So you're elongating your breath and you're lowering the health rate. You're elongating your breath and you're lowering the heart rate. And that will put you into a tranquil state. So it's very important that we don't miss the medulla. So it's okay to use the spiritual eye, but if we overuse it, then it can draw too much energy into this part of the brain and it can cause headaches for some yogis. So I encourage yogis not to overuse it and to instead mostly use the medulla and the crown. Much healthier for the yogi. So that's why. That's why. So we answered Olga and the mad bliss. How do you regulate we were talking about how to regulate bliss. Somebody wrote me, how should I regulate my bliss? And I said, be like the very good drunk. The very good drunk, he only takes sips of his wine or his alcohol, right? He just takes little tiny sips and he doesn't get over drunk. He just stays a little bit drunk all day, right? That's the very good drunk. And we can do the same thing with the bliss that's in the spine and the bliss that you feel through the cute baby meditation. That's the left amygdala. You can get a little bit drunk and just stay that way all day. And it's absolutely worthwhile and transformative. Olga, that was a beautiful experience. Thank you for sharing it with us. I really love it. Lesta, dear Guruji, would you please go over where the third chakra is? So in the Navi Kriya, because it's kind of all over the place if you try and look it up, right? So in the Navi Kriya, we're going to begin with this mental helper by putting the two thumbs together, and then we place those into the belly button. And that's the location for us of the third chakra. And so we're going to put our head into the neck lock and just om, om. And when I'm oming, I'm pressing gently into the belly button. Now, if you feel the energy center and it's slightly below or slightly above the belly button, that is okay. That's just fine. But you can continue to om into the belly button or slightly above it. All right, so I just om, om, and I'm pressing each time. This is only a mental assist. And so eventually you can just drop the hands, leave them in your lap, and do that same thing mentally. Om, om. And these are all mental ohms. And I don't have to coordinate it with my breath. Right? And then I flip the neck backwards very gently, and I om on the backside of that same point. Now you'll have books that will say, well, the third chakra is the solar plexus. Well, there's an energy center in the solar plexus, but it's a minor energy center. It's a minor chakra. And then there's the heart. Obviously, that's not the third. That's the fourth, right? So you're going to have different systems that are using different centers for different reasons. Or they just don't know. And very often, people just don't know. They're just handed something from somebody else and they run with it, but they don't actually know. And that's totally normal. So that's the third chakra. It's right there, pretty much at the belly button. All right. Christina. Hi, Forrest and fellow yogis. I am new and am still figuring out how everything works. To add, I am not sure if I will make to the call. That's just fine. 1, why do energy sensations come and go? Well, this is the information that was below the conscious mind, and you're integrating, and so it's coming into your awareness. So it was below your awareness, and now it's coming into your awareness. And when they get too strong, it's not so great, right? So it's okay if they come up and then they fall away, and then they come up and they fall away. That's just fine, because the purpose of Kriya is not for energy, it is for consciousness. And so we're not overly concerned with the feelings of energy. In fact, I would talk to Ashok and I would tell him, I feel this energy and I feel that energy. And he's like, okay. He didn't really care. But I talked about consciousness. I talked about bliss. He's like, great, go for it. You know, he was totally different attitude. Totally different attitude than a normal yogi teacher that you find out there. Just a totally different orientation, and for a very, very good reason. It's not about the energy, it's about the consciousness. So it's okay if it goes up and it goes down. Why do the energy sensations come and go? Meaning, why do we experience sensations potently and powerfully during some meditations and during others feel nothing? Totally normal. So why is that? It's coming in and it's going out of the awareness. And sometimes something is new and fresh. And so the subconscious, now you're going to be overly aware of it and it just feels humongous. And then you feel that same thing 10 or 20 times and it's automatically going to dim from your awareness slightly because it's not as important to you. And so that's another reason why. Totally natural, totally normal. What are your thoughts on initiations? What is the importance of doing an initiation correctly? Well, I'm not sure what initiation that you're talking about. So in Kriya Yoga, so I initiate people in Kriya Yoga. And most of that initiation is me giving you the Kriya and then you doing the Kriya. It's kind of like how can I say? It's like getting a car. So if I just give you the car, it's not enough. You actually have to drive the car for it to be meaningful, right? Same thing with the Kriya. The big blessing of the Kriya is in the doing. So it's not just the initiation. And you'll find these systems where the initiation and the darshan, which all of this is great, all of that is over emphasized, and the actual doing of the meditation is under emphasized. Well, that's kind of opposite the way it should be, right? The doing ought to be overemphasized, and the initiation ought to be underemphasized, in my opinion. That would make sense, right? Because yoga is a system of doing. Of all of the philosophies, it's the one philosophy that says, go do this, right? This is how you unlock heaven. Go do it. Go turn the key, right? So if you don't, oh, no worries. Bye. Great to have you. Anybody that has to go at any time, totally understandable. Come and go as you please. I don't mind at all. And so, yoga is the one system that says, go turn the key. So I think initiations are great, but they're hopefully for the technique that you receive, and then you go home and you try it out. So sometimes an initiation can be life transformative, right? It's an experience, and sometimes it's a deep and profound experience. But that's not enough. One experience is not enough. We want to know the gateway, right? We want to know, how do I go into this every single time? Those three things, how do I go into those? How do I use them every single time, day after day after day? So that to me is much more important. Great question. Lucas, my awareness during the day often gets pulled up to the upper back side of my head. So that's a bit of a energetic and roll up of consciousness. 1 to 2 centimeters above the little round bone on the back side. Especially during walks through nature, listening to music. It feels blissful, and I get a slight feeling of union with the divine. Oh, that's gorgeous. When I cultivate divine love during the day, this is also the point where I feel the closest. What is it with that point? Are there ways to integrate that natural attraction into my practice? Should I add this point to my spinal breathing after the medulla? Great question. So that's a roll-up of consciousness, and you're feeling even a little bit of absorption into the divine. Beautiful, beautiful. It's happening spontaneously and naturally. And we don't want to breathe through the brain. But when you're done doing your Kriya or your HRV resonance, and you're ready to sit in the Paravastha, then you can remember this experience and induce it a little bit by remembering this experience, and draw yourself up to that point. And that will help you draw up, so you can have very often we'll feel ourselves in the heart. We'll have a roll up of consciousness, and the heart will feel expanded. We'll feel that loving kindness. We might feel ourselves go into the throat. Somebody said, it felt like my center of gravity came up into the heart. That's it. That's the roll up of consciousness. Can go into the throat, then into the medulla. And then sometimes it will just float right up to the crown. So we're going through the brain, but we don't breathe through the brain, because there's no need for war at this point. This is the battlefield of Kurukshetra. This is heaven. So we just do the war, and then we float into heaven. That's the Kriya Yoga idea in the Panchanan Bhattacharya lineage. And so once you've finished your war, you've finished your Kriya Yoga, then you can sit in the Paravastha, enjoy what you feel, the deep things that you feel. Those three things, right? Enjoy those deep things, and then see if you float up to that point, or you might float up to that point and the crown, or you might just float up to that point and feel expanded, and you're already feeling expansion. You're saying, you said somewhere that you were feeling a slight feeling of union with the divine. That's absorption. So you can feel that in the Paravastha and just soak in that. Soak in that like the holy potato. Just soak it into yourself, and that will become a very, very powerful absorption. So really, really beautiful, Lucas. And so that's how you incorporate it. You incorporate it in the Paravastha. When you're not doing an active breath, then you just allow yourself to be drawn up to that point. So the war of Kriya Yoga, the float and the bliss and the expansion of heaven. Very simple, right? Beautiful. Oh my God, that's it. I'm missing a question because I remember the other Lucas. You were asking, what is it to live from the heart? Can you talk about living from the heart? And this really happens spontaneously. So a lot of the things that we're doing in the Kriya Yoga, in meditation, like the purpose of meditation is I find these deep states, and then I walk out into my life and I lose the deep states. And you do that enough, a few times actually, and you start to crave the deep states. It's like, I had this state and now I'm in my day and I've lost this state. And then, okay, so you come back to meditations like, how do I keep this state? And doing this over and over again, you start to integrate some of that deep state into your life. And so it's happening very spontaneously and very naturally. You find something beautiful and deep, you figure out how to incorporate it into your life. And just so if you ask somebody who's a bit of a hippie, a new age person, you say, how do you live from the heart? And they will just say, just love everything all the time. And I think that's kind of beautiful, but also very overly simplistic, because the world is kind of not made for that. Right? If you haven't noticed, it's not quite made for that. And so what happens is your true internal state is here, and yet you have to live in a very practical way here. And so all of these states, including living from the heart, it's an internal state of being. And so that being is the primary thing. It's not necessarily going to show up in the doing. And so, for example, I absolutely adore and love my daughter, but she's also very young and she needs discipline. Otherwise, she'll grow up like a wild thing. And that's an unkindness to allow her to grow up wild, right? That's not kind. So in order to be kind, I have to discipline her. I have to be the authority. I have to talk to her strongly so she knows that I'm the authority, right? And listens, because I'm trying to give her what I have. And you're young and you don't know anything, and you don't know that these things are important. So you have to have an authority to tell you that these things are important. And so while I'm in an internal state of absolute love, I have to act in a way which is authoritarian to make my point with my daughter, right? That's normal parenting. And so in the same way, you can be in your day in a state of love, and yet you have to exert a boundary. And it's not, so rather than just being in your heart and being in love, that's the simple answer. I'm giving you a more complex answer, which is, yeah, be in that love and yet have boundaries, pay your bills, drive your car, all the normal stuff, right? And so you don't always see the love. And you may wonder, where is this love? I have this crazy love inside of me, and yet it's not showing. Yeah, that's very much the state that the yogi will rest in. That you're in this bliss and nobody knows it. You're communing with Divine Mother in the middle of the grocery store and nobody knows it. It's an internal state of being. And only the person who is extremely watchful of you may know. Only your closest friends and your closest loved ones who you trust may know about this secret garden inside of you, which you have created, right? So don't expect that it's going to show up in your life because, how can I say, you need to address the practical things which are in front of you. And that's very often a lower system than your internal state of being. And so you'll find yourself using these lower level practical functions, and yet internally you're not bothered, you don't care. There's a freedom inside of you. So the internal state of being is there, and yet the external looks completely natural and normal. And it's a bit strange at first, and then it just becomes very, very normal that this is all this stuff is going on inside of you and nobody knows. You can just be totally normal, and you're kind of an under the radar yogi. And that's how I kind of learned this from Brother Premomoy. It was really emphasized to me as a monastic that you don't have to go try and get everybody to practice Kriya Yoga when you're a monk, right? That was Brother Premomoy's thing, that you didn't have to go out and try and yank people into yoga. You could just be, right? Just be normal. And he really emphasized that to the young monks. And Brother Premoy was a Yugoslavian prince, and he had a lot of wisdom. And I have found this to be very, very wise. So, and kind of beautiful that you're always in the state of humility, that you don't have to go out and tell everybody everything, right? Just the people that you love and the people that you trust. So beautiful. I'm glad. I hope you like that answer. I don't know. Maybe there was something more specific, and so please feel free to follow up with me and ask more about that. And let me go over here and answer some questions on the side. All right, let's see. Yeah, Ronan says they turn it into left brain exercise. There's the count. Madhvi, Forrest, I've been thinking about Krishna's peacock feathers lately. Could you explain what they represent? That's the spiritual eye. Is this about the blue pearl or something else? Yes, that is the spiritual eye. Sometimes it's called the blue pearl. And I had a student. I think this relates. I had a student that started seeing, and it was quite early in his Kriya practice. I think you would have expected it after years and years, but it actually happened, I think, in the second or third year of his Kriya. I think it was second or third year. He started seeing Divine Mother's eyes. So you see those eyes. Divine Mother was not even his Ishta, but sometimes the higher self is like, this is your Ishta right now, right? Sometimes it just comes that way. And it was this beautiful experience. He kept seeing Divine Mother's eyes. And I'm going to sneeze, maybe not. So he kept seeing Divine Mother's eyes. And I'm like, that's beautiful. And then he called me back. He goes, it's happening a lot. I'm like, how much? He's like, they're everywhere, almost all the time. And it started to freak him out a little bit. And he started to kind of, he was seeing a lot of faces as well. So he was seeing face. And that was really kind of freaking him out. And then I said, well, you know what? That's very much like a fractal, isn't it? He goes, yes. I said, okay, go look at the old pictures of Brahma with all of the faces. And you see these pictures with Brahma, one face, and then boom, 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 like 1,000 faces, like 100 faces, right? I'm like, can you see the fractal nature in that picture? He goes, oh my God, I see it. And isn't that what's happening with you and with the face of that are coming to you and with the spiritual eyes that are coming to you? He goes, oh my God, yes. And I'm like, so this has happened before to other yogis, and you're just one more yogi having a similar experience. And just knowing that he was not alone calmed him down. And when he calmed down, it went down. It stopped being so overwhelming. And so you'll find this when things arise, that if you get too wrapped up in it, it will emphasize it. And sometimes that's great, and sometimes it's not so great. So you want to, it's kind of a good thing to know. So imagine that you're seeing Krishna's eyes or Divine Mother's eyes over and over and over and over and over. That's kind of the peacock. And now also I've had another experience where I will look into the spiritual eye, and okay, so for a while I was seeing the spiritual eye, and then a yogi would come to me, and then Divine Mother would come to me inside of the spiritual eye. So I'd still see the circle, and then they would come from inside, and that kept happening. And then I would see people that would see my videos that I didn't know, and they'd think about me very, very strongly, and I would see them, and I would just see these faces, and I'm like, I don't know you. And I would just say, blessings, and that was it. Or God bless you. Not me. I'm not the blesser. It's all through Ma. Okay, so that started happening, and then at a certain point, I would look into the spiritual eye, and I would just see star, 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 and I'm like, oh my God, that's space. That's a space samadhi on the other side of the spiritual eye, and it's kind of like the infinite. I think I've said this before. It's kind of like the infinite is just like, hello. So instead of Divine Mother coming to me, it was the infinite. And that's also the peacock feathers, isn't it? So they're also a representation of that spacious samadhi in the deep dark blue of the infinite. So yes, those are the spiritual eye, and they are that representation of the infinite. Isn't that beautiful? Amber says, doing Om Japa into the throat has helped me has helped so much with the intensity that you were feeling. The Om Japa helps so much and makes it easy. I'm so glad to hear that. Oh, they disappear when touched. I see. Yeah. All right. I think there was another question here. Hi, Jeff. I had a realization that I was a past Buddhist. I was so fascinated with the Buddha since I was a kid. There it is. That's the affinity, which shows you the past life. And, you can explain that with psychology. That's fine. Or you can explain it that it's a past life, which is also fine. Can we count when paying attention to heartbeat or the ringing sound in the ears? By counting, I feel like I don't slip into sleep in meditation, but does counting is more using the left brain. Well, that's actually why in Kriya Yoga we count each breath. So we in and out, that's one Kriya, in and out, that's another Kriya. And we're counting our Kriya. And that's why, because it keeps a little bit of the left brain. Now, sometimes you might want to drop that. You're like, I just want to feel the freeze, so I'm just going to drop that. And other times you'll feel like you're dipping too far into sleep. And so you'll want to pull yourself back out a little bit and maintain. So we're looking for that very special balance between we want some subconscious alpha, theta, delta. We want that there, but not so much that the beta brainwave becomes submerged. So a little is good and a balance is fantastic. And that balance is what helps open you up to the superconscious mind, which is the third, right? So we got subconscious, conscious, integration leads to doorway into the third. So perfect. Yes, absolutely. A little bit of counting is great. And then other times, so experiment. Like where's the balance for me right now? So today I'm going to count. Okay, that was helpful. Today I'm going to drop it. Okay, that was helpful. So it's all about maintaining the balance, and that's something that you have to feel inside of yourself. Lesta, first time I learned to do Zen meditation, I saw myself as a man meditating in India with a group of men indoors in an outdoor pavilion with elephants walking by in the street, and you smell chutney. I'd never heard about past lives at that time. Perfect. That's it. That's a past life remembrance. Okay. Can we get overly drunk on expansion? No. If you keep expanding, you will go into the non-dual state. So it eventually will become a samadhi. So no, you can't. I don't think you can. Well, it will crystallize into a samadhi. And that's really the secret of samadhi. That expansion leads to, yeah, isn't that beautiful? Expansion leads to samadhi. So the spaciousness exercise, I went into samadhi with that. Feeling expansion and then bliss, and then expansion and then bliss. I went into samadhi with that. Stepping back, which is expansive. I went into samadhi with that. The exercise that I gave you, going up, feeling what's there, bringing it down into your heart, going back up, feeling what's there, bringing it down into your heart. I went into a samadhi with that. So all of these things will go into samadhi. All of those immaterial meditations, they will go into a samadhi. And so, yeah, you can't get overly, well, you can. If you're driving your car and you go into a samadhi, it might not be good. I'm sure you'll be protected, but I wouldn't recommend it. It's not something I would try and do on purpose. So yeah, that's where that goes. Glenn, when doing Om Japa in the heart, I felt a pull to hold someone in my heart with deep love. I strongly felt their emotional mental presence, and I grew worried and bounced out of the state. When this happens spontaneously, it seems a good experience. Is this a practice to do in general? Was this possibly a healing, if a troubled relationship? Yeah, so that's a spontaneous ho'oponopono that you just came. It just came to you. So you're in that you're practicing ho'oponopono, and I have a video on ho'oponopono. Kind of hard to spell. H-O-O-Pono. So I hope you can spell that. But it's yeah, that's the ho'oponopono practice, and it just happens spontaneously, and it's deeply healing, not just for the relationship, but for you. So each time you do something like that, you're cleaning something out of yourself, and it will take a burden off of you. Sometimes there are people who are 1,000 miles away. You can't talk to them. Maybe they don't want to talk to you. Maybe you don't think it would actually be good for you to reach out and talk to them. It's like you can look down that road and you're like, I don't think I want to start that conversation, right? I need resolution internally, but externally I don't need the conversation. The Ho'oponopono does all of it internally, and that's really powerful, because there are things that you want to say to your boss that you cannot say to your boss because you don't want to get fired, right? but you can say them internally in a ho'oponopono process. And it saves you from getting fired, and yet you have this powerful resolution. So it's really, really powerful in that way. And then you will go into, let's say, you're at work and there's a coworker, you can't talk to them about these things. It's just, it wouldn't be conducive. It wouldn't work out well. You can just kind of see that. So you do the ho'oponopono, and then you come back, and they're different. How did that work? Well, something shifted in you, and the moment they see you, it shifts for them as well. That's the psychological part. And then there's the energetic component, that it's all happening below the surface while you're doing the ho'oponopono. So it's really powerful. And yeah, these things will just come to a yogi. They will just happen to you. You will intuit them. The higher self will say, here, take this. You need to do this. And then you do it, and you get this wonderful benefit. Was this possibly a healing if a troubled relationship? Yep, absolutely. Ho'oponopono. I try to just do what I am led outside of normal Kriya that you teach. Yes, absolutely. You want to listen to those internal messages. And so always in my practice, I always come back to what I was taught, but I allow myself to listen to more. And then I come back to what I was taught, and then I allow myself to listen. And this loop of learning has been infinitely powerful in my practice, infinitely powerful in my personal practice. So I always come back so I don't lead myself astray. And yet I'm always listening to what the higher self is trying to tell me. And I've just found that to be infinitely helpful. So beautiful, Glenn.
Thank you.
That's a perfect, yeah, absolutely. That's a really perfect example of a download of connecting with the higher self. And this is higher self therapy, giving you an internal process of ho'oponopono, just dropping it in your lap. Here, do this. Beautiful. Thank you for sharing that with us. That's awesome. Okay. Oh, I need little arrows on this thing so it can go slow. It likes to skip. Okay. What are the possible negative side effects, Ronan? What are the possible negative side effects of not cleaning the chakras with Om and still running energy on the spine? I remember your video on being tamasic. Can you expand on this, please? Yes. So it's exactly like having a dirty house, and you're just, how can I say? So, okay, so my house is dirty. I don't vacuum. I don't sweep. I don't throw the dirt out of the house. Instead, I'm just going to run back and forth, and it kind of moves the dirt this much, right? So I'm running back and forth. It kind of stirs the dirt out this much, and it opens up a channel. I imagine I can see myself with a house, like with, like a hoarder, and boxes everywhere and junk everywhere. If you just run through the center of the house, it will knock those boxes out of the way, right? Enough that you have a clear channel to go up. In this case, we're going up the spine into the brain, right? And that's what they're doing. So they're opening up the channel, but they don't actually clean. And so two things happen. It's kind of the same thing, but so what is negative and buried gets drawn out. And so you find yourself in heavy emotional states spontaneously. You find yourself more aggravated spontaneously with everybody around you for no particular reason, because this subconscious is coming out and you're not cleaning it out. And then even possibly worse, you connect to these upper nervous system energies, the higher self. You start to get some of that really powerful, different magnitude energy, right? Like look at the chakras, right? We start out with 4 petals and we end up with 1,000. So you start to get more of that charge and it's coming into you, and then it falls down into this unresolved junk in the lower centers, and you have polarity. And Ashok loved talking about polarity, and nobody talks about polarity except Ashok and me. Like nobody talks about that. But he would talk about it all the time. It was one of his favorite things to explain. And it's because this upper nervous system energy is falling into an unresolved issue, and it just blows. So it's like I had 4 volts in the negative thing, and now I've got 1,000 volts, and it just blows up. And so what does that look like in your life? It's kind of like, so you go into a meditation and you feel just really great. You feel this upper nervous system energy. You feel wonderful. And then you come out and somebody breaks your peace and talks to you a little bit, and you just bite their head off. You just go, ah, right? And then you're watching yourself and you go, oh my God, what just happened? What is going on? I thought meditation was supposed to make me peaceful. Yes, when you do the Om Japa and you clean it out. But that was polarity. That was the upper nervous system energy falling into a lower chakra concern that you had that you did not clean out. So that's what. Beautiful question. Ronan, you have your hand up?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Just to expand on that question, because there's a few people that teach that if you just meditate in the crown or the third eye, then it automatically cleans out all the lower chakras. And I found out kind of the hard way that that's not the case. That's why I was asking that question, because all the things that you said are pretty much true.
Yeah.
And even if you are pretty clean at some point, I think you collect dirt over time. So as you're meditating kind of in the crown, really, it really becomes a problem later. Yeah. So I've experienced that, but it's interesting that some people are actually teaching that you should only meditate in the crown, and somehow that affects everything. That sounds like bad advice now.
I totally agree. There is a lineage, a Kriya lineage, and they stress this, and they're coming from a monk. So Lahiri Baba said Kriya is for householders, but this guy decided he's going to be a monk. And so from his teachings, which were overly esoteric, in my estimation, he's too into esoteric understandings. And that means this chakra and that chakra and this chakra and this energy and that energy. And it's like, okay, that's all energy. So now you're locked back into the energy. You're locked. Again, you're not free. This is not freedom. Esoteric understandings are a potential lock on you. Kundalini, being overly into Kundalini is a lock. It's another lock on you. It's not freedom. It's not Jiva Mukta. It's not that ultimate freedom. The consciousness, the bliss will lead you to that freedom. Expansion, bliss will lead you to that freedom, but Kundalini won't necessarily lead you to it. And over dependence on Kundalini or the spiritual eye, all of these things will lead you in the wrong direction. And so, yeah, there's this lineage, and they say, and they're getting it from Lahiri Baba. So at a certain point, Lahiri Baba said, the Kriya Yogi may feel as if he is drawn up into the brain. So that's a roll-up of consciousness. And then he will Om into the chakras below. And the Kriya is still working. He's still cleaning himself out. This is a kind of higher cleaning which is taking place. And he says this is a very powerful Kriya. And they're like, let's skip right ahead. Let's go straight there. Let's go to home base. We will not swing the bat. We will not run the bases. We will just go home. Well, you can't do that. Baseball doesn't work that way. You have to swing the bat. You have to hit the ball. You have to run the bases. You have to make it all the way around. And Kriya Yoga is a program, first of all, of cleaning And Lahiri Baba said, you've got to clean out the chakras. And I don't know about you, but when my kitchen is dirty, I can't be upstairs sweeping. I have to be in the kitchen sweeping the kitchen because the kitchen is dirty. This is not rocket science, right?
Yeah.
So the chakra is dirty. I've got to stay there and clean the chakra. And if you don't believe me, test it out for yourself. Oh, I can feel this in this chakra. What if I just go up here and Om over here? Does it clean it out? Or is it better if I go down? So in my estimation, those lineages are trying to skip ahead. And I saw the Kriya and I'm like, well, if you just do the correct Om Japa in the chakras, everything you're talking about will just happen automatically. Don't you know that? No, they don't. No, they don't.
Yeah, definitely. When I started doing it in the chakras, you're the only person I've found that speaks about this. It really did make a huge difference. Like it's a whole different experience entirely. Yeah, thank you very much.
Beautiful. Oh, beautiful, beautiful, beautiful testimony. Thank you. Very, very cool. And isn't it nice to know how it can go wrong and how we can avoid letting it go wrong with these different instructions? Amber says, I have a question about this experience. If it is what yogis mean when they are aware during sleep or something else. I was meditating on pure consciousness for 8 to 12 hours each day for about a week. Lots of bliss. One day I laid down for bed and the experience happened. It was as if my eyes never closed. I was aware as if waking. I noticed the passage of time flowing extremely quickly. Dreams flew by in less than a blink, and in 3 seconds the sun came up. I had so much bliss when waking. Yes, so what's happening in this kind of experience is that some of your beta brain wave is still present in sleep, like more than normal. So if you're in sleep and you don't have any dreams, that means your beta brainwave went away pretty much entirely. And that's the dreamless sleep. That is the dreamless sleep state. Couldn't find my words, couldn't find my letters. So, and then you'll notice that you have a dream and it's that much conscious mind is there, right? And then you're aware in the sleep, and that means that much of the beta brainwave is present. And so you had a certain amount, which sounds like a healthy amount, and then you'll find some people want to do lucid dreaming every night, and it means that they have about that much beta brainwave every single night, and it will tire them out because it's too much. And so I don't really teach this kind of thing, because if you have too much, you won't have the proper sleep and the body will not heal. You won't rest enough. So it can go wrong. But this sounds like a very healthy experience, and yes, absolutely, that's what they're talking about. Okay, Gurav says he has to go. Thank you, Gurav. Amber's seen Divine Mother's eye. Beautiful. Lesta. Oh, where'd it go? Oh, Julia has to go, I think. Okay. Bye, Julia. Can you do Ho'oponopono with for a passed away person? Absolutely. Yes, it will totally work with somebody who has passed away. And it's a beautiful way to come into resolution with them. And it really works beautifully. Siddhant says, I feel a lot of bliss doing pranayama. Thoughts are still there in the background, which is normal, with Om Japa at the time. And when I want to stop, there is a blissful sensation in the medulla. At this point, there is relaxation, and I am not breathing deeply. That's the tranquil breath. And the breath is in the lower abdomen. Yes, that is still the tranquil breath. Absolutely the tranquil breath. So there are 3 primary levels of the tranquil breath. When it first comes, you'll notice that the chest is a little bit frozen and the breath has moved down into the belly, and it will be kind of a rapid breath, a very shallow and sometimes slightly rapid breath. And you'll be like, is this really the tranquil breath? Yes, because it has gone down into the belly and the chest is slightly frozen. And then that same breath, which is in the belly and shallow, will kind of elongate. So it'll go a little bit like that. And it won't be so rapid. It'll be a little slow. So that's the medium tranquil breath.
Yeah, that happens.
Or the second level of the tranquil breath. That's it. And so then it will get super long, and it will go, hey, where's my breath? I don't see it. And then it'll go back, oh, there's my, oh, where'd it go? Because it's really long. And this is the Great Kumbhak. When they say the Great Kumbhak, this is it. Oh, where'd it go? Where's my breath? There is no breath. What's there? Oh, there it is. It's just really long. That's the Great Kumbhak. So beautiful. The thoughts are still there, though, but the feeling is good. And this is normal. So you will notice sometimes you're in a very deep state and there are still conscious mind thoughts. Remember, we are coming out by degrees from the left brain. And so you're heading directly into peace. You're going directly into the right brain, and yet still there are left brain functions which are operational. And there are still thoughts, and this is normal. Even as you go into the Savikalpa Samadhi, there is still reasoning and recollection, Patanjali tells us. Isn't that amazing? Now, it's not the manas mind. It's the buddhi mind. And the buddhi mind will say, oh, is this the samadhi? And that's a reasoning and a recollection during a samadhi. And so don't look for the left brain chatter to be perfect. It doesn't have to be. Now, the more quiet it is, of course, wonderful, right? And at a certain point, you may have an absorption of your mind and the beta brainwave will be completely quiet. And you'll just watch the subconscious mind. And that's an absorption into your own mind, into silence. But it does not have to be perfect, okay?
Right.
So great. And should I just be at this point or try to notice edges of my eye span at this point? So if you're in that state and you're really noticing the tranquil breath and it's really blissful, just be with that. That you want to be with the biggest thing. So so here's an example. I've got all this bliss, but I worry that I should be over here with the spiritual eye. Or, I've got all this bliss, but I worry I should be over here with the crown. Or I should be having some other experience. No, be with the bliss. And I explained this. I had this wonderful student, and she goes, I have to do 108 Kriya every day. And I'm like, okay. And I kept training her to feel and notice and enjoy and feel and notice and enjoy. And she reached this point. She started getting really blissful. And she goes, oh my God, I did this meditation. It was so blissful. And I was in that bliss. It was so great. So she's in the bliss, right? And then she's like, but then I remembered I have to go and do my 108 Kriya. I have to, left brain have to. And she did. And she ran over the bliss. And all the bliss went away and she did all the Kriya. And I'm like, okay, you're praying to Jesus. You're praying to Jesus and Jesus shows up. And you say to Jesus, Jesus, I haven't finished my rosary. What the hell are you doing here? Nobody says that. Nobody says that, right? We just go, oh my God, he's Jesus. And we just shut up and enjoy, right? That's what we do, right? When Jesus shows up. So this is just an example. Like, okay, I have this big bliss. What do I do? Oh, enjoy. Be the holy potato.
Right.
I was in this, I was in this absorption I never felt before, and it didn't look like the crown. It didn't look like all these other things. I was just really big, like I was the big pot, and there were these currents of bliss going through it, almost as if I was a soup, and there were like, I don't know, some kind of noodle going through the soup, which was bliss.
Mm.
And I'm like, this is incredible. I've never had anything like this. And I didn't go looking for something else. I'm like, no, this is great. I will hang out with this pot of bliss noodles. I'm totally okay with this pot of bliss noodles. And I just hung out with these currents of bliss. And then I looked down, I'm like, is there a potato? Is forest? Because I felt so big and expanded, I had to look down to find myself. And way down at the bottom of the experience was forest, potato. And I'm like, oh, this is an absorption. And I don't care. Oh man, this bliss is so great. I'm just here with the bliss. I'm here with the pot. And I just enjoyed that. I don't even know how long. And then I looked down again. And this is, by the way, this looking down, this is that little bit left over of the left brain, which is still wondering, right? So there's still a tiny little left brain function going on. And I looked down, and there was no potato. There was no body. I'm like, oh, it's a samadhi. Okay. And I just hung out with the bliss.
Okay.
And so that deep experience, that's what you want to embrace.
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful.
So, two things are happening. Like, one thing is like, I'm not experiencing that third level of tranquil breath every time. So I think I don't count the first degree of tranquil breath that I feel into that. And
You should.
yeah,
You should.
I should. And second thing is like, once you are saying like, if I feel a lot of bliss with just the first kriya, sometimes I spend a lot of time enjoying that being the holy potato, but then you don't have time to do third kriya. So how do you practice that? Because you have to practice that every day as well.
No, you don't.
Okay.
You don't have to. It becomes the buffet. And this was taught to me by Ashok. He said, I got to the end of all of the kriya, and he finally said to me, now do the kriya which lodges you the most powerfully into the medulla.
Right.
So that's tranquil breath, freeze response, roll up of consciousness. Whatever does that the most powerfully, do that.
Mm-hmm.
And so it becomes a buffet. It becomes another tool in your toolbox. And you don't have to do it every day. So again, if I'm in this blissful state and I'm like, I have to do the third kriya, and then you come out of that state and you do the third kriya and it messes up the blissful state. Yeah. Oh no, I ran over my bliss. So that's not working. That's not a deep kriya program anymore. And I make these mistakes. I have made these mistakes. And so if you make this mistake, don't go, oh my God, I ran over my bliss. I'm going to hell. No. It's a learning experience. I ran over my bliss and it's totally okay. And I'm going to remember next time I'm going to be in that bliss and I'm going to go, oh, hell no, I'm staying here. This is good. This is great. I'm right here. I'm sticking with the bliss. And so that's how we learn. Totally awesome.
Okay. Cool. Thank you.
You're so welcome. Okay, puja. Thank you, Forrest. Got to go cook. Very good. Deep freeze is always not there. I mean, I can feel my right ankle after sitting for 2 hours at the same position. Maybe I am doing kriya for long and paravasa for less. That's okay. If it's not perfect every time, like you were talking about, I can't get to that third level of the tranquil breath every time. That's okay. Don't worry about it. Just keep going. And John said this to me. So this is the guy that's having sahaja samadhis while he's at work, okay? And he says, so listen to your brother Yogi. He says, I had to let go of this idea. I had to understand that my meditations were going to go like this a little bit, and that was normal. And I just kind of go with it now. I don't worry about it. And that's a perfect state. That's a perfect statement. Sergio, does one have to Om into the chakras, or is breathing or putting attention on each considered Om Japa as well? To be Om Japa, you have to Om into it, but putting your attention and breathing through it is also very, very helpful. And so when you combine, I'm going to breathe through it and I'm going to Om into it. So I'm going to Om mentally, and as I breathe, and I'm Oming through my mouth so you can hear it, but you, of course, can do it through your nose. So I'm breathing and Oming at the same time. Very powerful. But so you do have to have an Om in there for it to be Om Japa, but just attention and just breathing through it is also very helpful. All right. A few times I've experienced the feeling, Amy says, a few times I've experienced the feeling of a presence in front of me while meditating. It makes me feel slightly fearful. What is this experience about? So, in the brain, when you feel a secondary presence, so the neurotheologists, they call this a secondary presence. And Todd Murphy describes it as an echo in the brain. And what that means is I'm in here and I'm hearing an echo from here. So I'm in the left hippocampus and I'm hearing an echo from the left amygdala, all right? You're hearing something from somewhere else, in other words. Or you may be in the left brain and you hear an echo of the expanse of knowing and you feel like the divine is all around you. That's an echo happening in the brain. So if you don't want to be afraid, think of it very practically that way. Secondary presence, echo in the brain, totally okay. You've got an audio system. There's an echo in the system. You don't freak out. You just go, oh, it's an echo, right? Same thing. But when it's overly fearful, when you feel it's, if you were to feel as if it was fearful and dark, that is an experience of the right amygdala. And so if that were to happen, then you want to do more you want to do more Navi Kriya. So that's in the Guardian video, highly recommended. And if you're worried about it, I would do 2 or 3 rounds. If not, just do 1 round every day. Try that for at least a week, if not every day for the rest of your life. That's what I do. And you will notice that the fear drastically goes down. And so that's very, very important. Now, if you're feeling that secondary presence and you're like, I don't know who this is and I'm just kind of freaked out, then that's not necessarily the right amygdala. And it's just the feeling of the higher self, of this secondary presence coming over you. And for example, when we're getting a download and when we're communicating with the higher self, we want to know, is this coming from somewhere else? I don't want this message coming from me. I'm kind of tired getting information from me. I would like to get information from the higher self. How do I know that this is correct? Well, one of the ways that you can know is that it is surprising you. And it surprises you because you're in the beta. Here's another way to describe it. You're in the beta brainwave, and this information is coming from the gamma brainwave. It's coming from the higher self, from the superconscious mind, the gamma. It's coming from that. And so it's not in your logical beta brainwave, and it hits you and you go, oh my God. And that's one of the ways you know you just got a download from the higher self. In the same way, you feel that secondary presence, like, okay, here's me, and then, oh my God, this is somebody else. And at first it's very strange because we don't talk about these things in the world, do we? And so, but with a little bit of time and a little bit of Navi, it gets very, very easy, very wonderful. And I remember when I was very young, I had a lot of feelings of loneliness. I was up in the middle of nowhere in Idaho. I was an introvert, and it was a perfect recipe to feel loneliness. And I really did a lot in my childhood. And then I found yoga, and I had lots of experiences with the divine and divine mother. And I remember this feeling of loneliness came over me a little bit in the ashram. And I looked at it at a certain point, and I'm like, you can't be lonely. You know God is with you. You know Divine Mother is with you all the time. How are you rationalizing this thing? And the whole problem just evaporated, right? It just, this idea of loneliness, I could never, I can't be lonely. Doesn't mean I can't be down or something else, but I can't really be lonely. And so it turns into something very powerful and very beautiful. And this is what I mean, that you have a right, you have a right brain, and your left brain ought to lean on the right brain. So I said that recently in a video, and that's how it works. That's that secondary presence. You don't have one brain, you have two, right? So kind of a strange thing. We're not used to thinking of it that way, but it becomes much more natural, especially with a little bit of Navi and a little bit of time, a little bit of trust. But we don't have to give all of our trust all at once, just give a little bit at a time, and it just grows. Echo of the Left Amygdala sounds like the best progressive rock album ever. Oh my God. That I would totally listen to that. That sounds awesome. When you go out and you make that band, you let me know. Ronan says, Ronan says, is it okay if we feel the Ishta angel from above or behind rather than the left side? Absolutely. Absolutely just fine. That works perfectly as well. That's naturally where I feel it, behind me, not to either side. That's perfect. Just finished the third training. Beautiful. And we did it. We got through all the questions. Oh my God. And we went 2 hours, right? Wow. Awesome. Well, huge hugs to all of you. And I love you guys. And I love these satsangs. And thank you everybody who was able. Thank you, Tasha. Thank you everybody who was able to make it and stick with us for 2 hours. Oh my goodness. So I hope you have a wonderful weekend. What's left of it with your family. God bless. Thank you, Ronan. Blessings. Oh, thank you. Thank you, Matthew. Tremendous. Heidi says tremendous. You spent so much time with us. I appreciate you. Thanks, Tasha. I really love getting through all of the questions. When we can't get to all the questions, I feel a little bad. And so I really like to get through all of the questions if we can. So thank you so much. Oh, thank you, Ashwin. God bless and see ya. Thank you, Kim. All right. Bye-bye.